Okay, welcome back, everybody. I want to do a quick set-aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, the big book, the steps, the program, the fellowship, and even you, God, so that I can have a new experience. Please help me to see the truth. Amen. A good friend of ours just drove up from Jersey. I want to welcome Chris to the gallery here.
Yes.
Some of you guys know. Some of you guys, whether you're here or whether you're listening to this on CD, if you don't know Chris S. from New Jersey, I recommend finding some CDs by him and listening to him, because I learned a lot from this guy. And he's a good friend of ours now, but he's the one that got us into doing our first workshop, and he runs pretty deep on this stuff. So if you're looking for CDs to listen to, keep that in mind. Don't let him hear me say that, because it'll make his head swell. But he's there's one of the guys that I really consider a friend and a mentor in this program. There's some people in this fellowship that run pretty deep, and I've been honored to know him. Another thing we've been doing, Chris, is today is the 1-year anniversary of Mark's death. So we've been burning a candle up here in his honor all day, and I'm doing pretty good. I've only teared up about 3 times when I talk about him. There's certain phrases that they're so Mark that I can't even get through them, because it reminds me so much of the impact this guy had in my life, to be wandering along in untreated alcoholism, in trouble, and to find ourselves in that workshop with him. This is the workshop. I brought it up so Glenn could rip it and make some copies of it. But when you talk about the hand of God, when God comes, He comes.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking about that workshop that we just wound up in the middle of, and even Mark one time looking at Katie, he goes, "Do you really think you had anything to do with being at that workshop that weekend?" I mean, you were moved there by the power, to put you in a place to be and you look at the ripple effect of what happened to us on that weekend, and getting involved in the work at a whole nother level, and that sort of thing. And then when we put the tapes in, it gave me goosebumps, because we were listening to the first CD. And Mark comes on there and he says, "I haven't done one of these in over 3 years." He'd gone silent for 3 years at one point, and so not only do we hear about this workshop, but we just happened to go to it. I don't know what made us go to it. That was not our style at the time. And then to find out that he hadn't done one like that in over 3 years, you just look at it and you go, there's an awful lot going on there.
Mm-hmm.
We talked last night about how the book says when we look back, we see the things that came to us. But I tried to say Mark used to say, discipline is the horse I ride. And we're going to get into that in step 10 and 11. But the first time I tried to say it, I couldn't get it out of my mouth, because he was a big believer in the disciplines of steps 10 and 11.
Okay, now I'm going to do 6. So...
back and forth, of course.
Oh, Jane said she loves it, so I'm going with what Jane says. One of the things, too, I wanted to say, and I'm sorry, what was your name that we were just talking? Paul and I were just talking. I do want to make a clarification. Remember, it's not in stone, the girl with girl and boy with boy thing. There's a lot of people that deviate from that plan. But what I'm saying is, I as a woman, I get sick of hearing there are not enough strong women in AA. I can hear more there is not enough strong sponsorship, more than I can hear there are not enough strong women. And so one of the things that I think is important is if in your area there is not enough, there isn't a strong woman, then you just take her through the work under the understanding that she is to get the women in her lineage and become the strong women in AA. We cannot continue to say there are not enough strong women in AA. I think not only are we reaffirming a very a poor affirmation, is we're keeping it alive. And we're keeping it alive by not saying your job. I've sponsored 30 women, and my whole deal is about you sponsoring, period. How many sponsees do you have? How many sponsees do you have? I mean, that's what I'm going at. Karen, same thing with Karen.
She did a sponsorship workshop at the house.
Yeah, well, Mark said to me, he was one of the very first people who said there's not enough strong women in AA. So once a month for 2 years, I did a sponsorship workshop, which I recorded it for my own personal people that were there. And I'm telling you, I must say the F word every 3 lines. I swear, it is just downright terrible. And Karen said, would you send it to me? And I said, I cuss a lot on there, man. I don't know what happened. And she said, boy, you really do. And it's like, and F this and F that. And whoa. You know how we women, when we all get together, we can rule the country. And but what ended up happening, for 2 years, I took a step a month. I had over 50 women showing up at my house, strictly teaching them how to sponsor. This was not taking them through the steps. It was about sponsorship. And I told Mark, I said, by God, I have over 50 women at my house that are learning how to sponsor. And he said, that's why I told you there weren't enough strong women in AA, Katie. He said, I knew of all people you'd be going, see? Now tell me there's not enough strong women in AA. Huh? What do you think about that?
Sometimes you can put that ego to work for good.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm going to do
whoa, I just took a sip. Okay. I knew it. I need a straw. There's a straw because he's going to jump in there on me. Oh, my God. I'm telling you, this is where it's brother and sister. I'm liable to stab him in the hand here in a minute and draw blood. So on page 76, it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, what is that? That's all the questions we just asked ourselves in the 5th step, right? Remember, the hour when you go home is the end of the 5th step. Semantics are important. So it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we look at step 6. Now here is where I'm not real big on this, but some people are. I don't think the 6th step requires a tremendous amount of knowledge. I think it can be very dangerous for alcoholics. If we get into too much understanding our defects, I'm telling you, we're going to lean towards wanting to fix them ourselves instead of letting God take them. You know, the truth of the matter is, I'm selfish and self-centered. I self-seek. When I get scared, I clearly get cocky. I got a level of pride that has worked well for me. It's also a double-edged sword, right? Are you with me on these things? Mm-hmm. I just need to go to God and ask for Him to remove them. And if I get too deep into this work, I just get too much knowledge. It's not a good thing for this alcoholic. That's just my opinion. It says we emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Indispensable means absolutely necessary. If we emphasize willingness as being indispensable, the only other things in life I think are indispensable is water, air, and food, right? Can't go very far without those. It's saying willingness is that important. And I believe a lot of that is because of spiritual principle, spiritual law. God gave us free will. He gave us free will to do whatever we want. I can go jump off a building if I want to, right? I could go rob a bank if I wanted to. I could go have an affair if I wanted to. There's a lot of things I can do. I try to live along spiritual principle. I try to stay connected to this power. This power says the only way I can enter is through you asking. Isn't that kind of cool? So God says you've got to be willing. You've got to come to me with this level of willingness.
A friend of ours likes to say that God is a gentleman. He doesn't go where He's not invited, and He doesn't stay where He's not made welcome.
That's exactly right. It says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? That is a question that they're asking us. And I'll tell you, I held on to a level of you remember I told you I left home at 15. I'm this tough little broad, I lived in this little house, the shrimp boats pulled up behind me. I am this tough little gal. I will get in the middle of a fight when I know I don't even know how to throw a punch, but that's just my nature. Charlie got in this fight in the airport, and I swear it was the most awkward thing. We're walking along, and this guy comes barreling down, and he elbows Charlie's 87-year-old mother. And Charlie's like, dude, man, he grabs him by the arm, and I'm thinking, uh-oh. And they did that moment where they stand there and growl at each other.
Well, he shoved me, and we go back. And
they hadn't shoved you yet. I'm telling the story.
And we're getting ready
No, you're going to ruin the story.
We're coming back together, and this little spider monkey comes flying from offset. We're just coming back together.
I hadn't even said the story yet.
Oh, I'm shortening the story.
Okay, so see, that's what he did. He shortened the story.
We're going to have a vote. Who likes my story better than her story? Yeah, okay, all right.
Don't you take his side.
My man.
So now listen. So what we got is, these two boys are like two bulls, And the guy goes, let go of me. And he said, hey, dude, let go of me. Let go of me. And the next thing you know, man, there's just that moment of, oh, my God, I think somebody's going to throw a punch in the airport. You can't do that anymore, right? And that guy just shoves the crap out of Charlie. And when he does it, I jump between them. And I'm like, hey, mister. And once again...
It confused the hell out of both of us. I got to tell you.
So here's the little spider monkey. You couldn't tell me to not do that. See, that's of my nature. For some of you women, you would have just backed away and went, whoa, dude. Not me, man. I'm like all over this guy. It's like, come on. What are you doing? That's because that's of my nature. Now, let me tell you something.
That's driven.
That's driven, but that has served me well because it protects me. It's also one of the things that is very, very dangerous. It puts me in places I shouldn't be. I get in predicaments that I'm in over my head. All that guy needed to do was take a swing at me. What would my husband have done? He'd possibly be in prison. He could have killed the guy if the guy had taken a swing at me.
My mother still talks about it, though. She's the one that used the term spider monkey. She said, Katie came flying in like a little spider monkey. I've never seen. She actually called me a leopard. Yeah,
but
I've never seen anything like it.
But can you imagine had that guy hit me? Charlie would have been so enraged that he threatened his mother and hit his wife that he could have killed the guy. Do you see how my pride... So when it says this willingness, those are the things I ask God for. It's like, God, I can't stop me in those moments. You scare Katie? Oh, man, I'll pick up a gun. You scare me. I already have enough... I'm 53. I got enough history of how I think I got the big old kahunas over here, right? And I really don't. So when it talks about that line comes alive to me when it says these absolutely are objectionable. Help me. Please help me. My sponsor and I are working on it at this present moment. It says, can he now take them all, every one? Well, this one's still out for debate. I'm doing everything in my power that I know I can do that caused my failure, right? If we still cling to something we'll not let go of, we ask God to help us be willing. That is that law of cause and effect. I am already very aware of a lot of things that I do that I have to be very careful of. The other prayer I do a lot of is, God, help me grow in understanding and effectiveness. Because I need to understand and be effective, yes? I mean, Charlie's, all the boys like to say I'm like taking a drink out of a fire hose. But, the truth is that sometimes that's very ineffective. That I come down way too hard. And I've got to back it up and I've got to come at you at a better angle. And these are the things about Katie's personality that can cause me problems, right?
Well, a lot of the awareness of this stuff has come out of the fourth column of the inventory. When it says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable, where did we admit that they were objectionable? Well, it's in the fourth column of that fifth step. When I'm looking at, when I'm not disregarding the person entirely and I'm looking at where was I at fault, where had I been selfish, dishonest, those are the things. Because the first time I did an inventory and we read my stuff, 6 and 7, we just kind of phoned it in, because I read my little confession list. And then when it came to 6 and 7, it felt like I was saying, God, please make me a better dude. It didn't really have any meat on the bone because I didn't have the awareness of having done a proper inventory. Well, now, when we've done a proper inventory, I've got up in my face all these defects of character. Where do I fall short? How do I act when I get scared? How do I act when I'm threatened? What happens when I'm selfish? And there's these things. And then the fresh stuff that's coming right out of that inventory is what I'm taking to God, saying, God, I'm ready for you to take all of them. I don't even know which ones they are. It says, take away the things that are going to stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I don't know which ones he's going to want me to keep or which ones and I don't even get to choose. I just have to become willing to have anything, all the stuff that we have admitted are objectionable. But this sixth step is a question of faith. It says, do I believe? Can he now take them all? Everyone, can he? Do I think he can? And, because the essence of step 6 is lack of power. Do I have the power to make this stuff go away? No. I've just got to take this awareness in it and go, God, I'm ready for you to take all this stuff away from me. This ain't the way I want to be. I'm ready for you to take it. I'm tired of trying to work on it myself. And then, and then it goes on and it says, when ready, we say something like this. In our home group, we close with the 7-step prayer. For several reasons. One is I think it's the purest AA prayer. It's not a Christian prayer. It's not from any faith. It's written straight out of our fellowship. And the other thing is a lot of people don't know it well enough that they chant afterwards. So, I'm not big on the chanting. For God's sake, Katie talked about when I came in, it was keep coming back, and then it was keep coming back. It works, and it was keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it. So work it. And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes. The new guy's coming in going, geez, I want to stop drinking whiskey, but do I have to chant like a kid at summer camp? Kumbaya, my Lord, and other stuff, okay, a little rant there. But then they started saying, God could and would if he was shot. Do they do that up here?
Yeah. A, B's, and C's.
Yeah, after then, and then to make fun of that, some people started saying at the end of the traditions, principles before personalities. All they were trying to do was make fun of the people that were saying God could and would. But now, but that's what I was saying. If the drunk comes in and he hears it 3 or 4 times in the rooms of AA, he thinks it's AA. So he goes, God could and would if he were shot. And all I'm saying is it's optional. You don't have to do it. It's not necessarily part of AA. It's okay to end the prayer with Amen. But we do the 7-step prayer because it's not from any other faith. And it's interesting, though, because so we say this every week, and it says, when ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And it says, we have then completed step 7. It's unbelievable. If you'd asked me during that first period of sobriety one time, what step did you get hung up on? I would have said 6 and 7 because I stopped after 5. It was a shock to me, and it's a shock to a lot of people that I do the work with. And we talk about, that we go through the work quickly with people. I had a lady one time, she said, are you one of these people that believes in taking people through the steps really fast? And I was like, no, not really fast. A week, maybe, 2 weeks if we're busy. And I can't find a place in the book where it talks about doing differently. I sit down and I lay out the problem in step 1. Then we talk about the psychic change and the solution. Let him decide if he wants to do this deal. Then we come back, we really hammer step 1. We do the step 2. I lay out the 3rd step for him, show him what the root of the problem is, what the basis of the rest of this work is going to do. Then when we finally that takes me about 3 hours to do 1, 2, and 3. Then we get down on our knees, we do a 3rd step prayer, and at once we start on this inventory. He writes the inventory. I'm like, I want you to go home and write on it tonight. Don't tell me you went to the 8 o'clock meeting, but you didn't have time to write the inventory. We'll hide out from the recovery process in the rooms of AA, if you let me. But then we write it, we do the resentment, the fear inventory, the sex inventory, we get together, we read it, and then, at the end of that night, after he's read inventory, he goes home and he spends an hour reflecting on it. He does 6 and 7 here. He writes his 8th step list out that night. He's on 9, 10, 11, and 12 that night. We generally do 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the same day. Is that kind of trippy? Because, it says, if we've, now that we've done 6 and 7, look at what it says next. And see if you find the place where it says chill for a little while and make a few meetings, it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. There's quotation marks around that faith without works is dead because it's a quote from the book of James from the Bible. You hear a lot of stuff about outside literature in AA. There's quoting outside literature right there. But it says faith without works is dead. This is a program of action. So it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. Now I got to tell you, this has been one of the great mysteries of AA for me. The way I work the inventory process now, and I've gone to some of my heroes, because there's two places in the book. One's on page 70 and one's on page 76, where it implies that I will have made a list of all the people I've harmed. And it troubles me a little bit as an AA technician or big book thumper or whatever you want to call it. I think it's interesting that Bill would put it in there twice, because, over on page 70, it said, we have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. And then we get over here and it says, we have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. That did not happen for me in the inventory process. And I've gone to some of my heroes in AA, and sometimes they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, one guy said, you're trying to pick the black out of the pepper, and other people just look at me like you're nuts. And when I talk to Mark, he goes, I don't know, but if you work with me, the 4th step and the 8th step are going to be separate events. And I was like, okay, fine. I guess I've done it both ways, but the way I do it now is when I get to this point, I say, let's make a list of all the people you've harmed, because there's probably going to be some. I know in my experience, there were people that I had harmed that did not come out of the inventory process. The example I always use is that I had stolen $15 out of my sister's purse one night, which was a huge compromise of my values. But it didn't come up under my resentment inventory. It didn't come up on my fear list, and it didn't come up in my sex inventory. But I knew I needed to make that right. So I just made a list of all people we have harmed. 2 words that are very big in our sponsorship lineage are in the 8th step, and it's the word all. It says, made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. There's a very good reason. There's a lot of reasons to make amends to most of the people on my list, but there's only one I know of to make all of them, and that's that step 1 experience. Do I believe that making amends has anything to do with whether I get loaded again? Do I believe that the amends process can block me, whether I know it or not? Because I'll tell you, if you don't want to make amends, all you got to do is go to an AA meeting and ask around. I guarantee you the bulk of the advice in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is geared towards not having to make the amends. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to make an amends, you can go to people and you'll find somebody that will say you don't have to make that amends. But what's amazing is when you go around to these AA conferences and you hear some of these speaker stories, what are always the most dramatic stories they tell? Amen. They come out of the amends process. They talk about cleaning it up with their family. They talk about miracles that happen when they approach people they had harmed. And I'm willing to let somebody talk me out of that. I'm about making all the amends. And I've seen some magic stuff happen out of it. And I've still got amends. I've got unfinished amends. I've got amends that are still out there from 25 years ago. But I've been making them, and I've got my cards. But what we do in AA is we become willing to make all these amends. And I like to use the cards. In my sponsorship lines, we use little 3x5 index cards, because for me, in my experience, if you let me just make a list of the people I've harmed, that list has a way of finding its way into a drawer somewhere, and I'll make the big ones. When it talks about we're like a tornado roaring its way through people's lives, I just want to make the amends of the first people that get touched by that tornado. The ones that I'm going to see, my wife and my boss and my, the closest people, but then some of that other stuff, and talk about, I really do believe in making amends. And Chris is the one, and God, Chris, we've quoted you all over the country, because Chris is the one that says that they should put the word actually in front of these steps. What if it said, we actually took inventory, we actually made a list of all people we had harmed and made amends. We actually made direct amends to such people we had harmed. No kidding, because not just I kind of approve of it in theory, is that step one experience still driving me at that point? Because I don't know anybody that's ever walked into. Have you ever seen anybody walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, desperate, hopeless, have them take a seat, get a cup of coffee, sit down in the chair, and look up at those steps on the wall and read down the list and go, that ought to do it. I got to be driven by my step one experience this whole time, and in order to get to the point where I'm going, I'm going to make all these amends, because I want to see, I'll never be able, we talk about, we don't want to hear about your opinion on an experience you've never had. If I've never made direct amends to everybody I've harmed, how am I going to tell you what that's like? And so, when I first met with Mark, we sat down at the table, and, he's like, how long since you wrote inventory? Well, it had been a little while. Where are you at in the amends process? Well, I've still got some of them out there. Do you pray and meditate? Not really. Do you do a 10th step spot checker? No, not really. It's like, well, how's that 5-step program working out for you? And so we really got about the business of really trying to work an AA program. And it is amazing stuff, and I have seen stuff come out of this amends process. But, what it takes is, what I've noticed, and I was talking with Heidi during the break about this, is that we tend to transmit our own experience. And what I've seen in my history is that if I'm weak in the amends process, I'm going to let my sponsees off the hook in the amends process. And when I get all about the amends process, then I'm going to, the early part of every conversation with them is going to be, where are you at in the amends process? Have you made any approaches? Do you have any unfinished amends? What's going on with that? Because we got to keep ourselves pressed into doing this stuff. But the magic, oh my God, we're not going to go a whole lot into the mechanics but we're going to have a good deal of time, and I'm going to let Katie roll on some of this for a while, and then I'll come back in a little later.
Well, one of the things, too, is I was incredibly weak in my 8 and 9. Oh, my gosh. I bet you I made 10 amends when I got sober, and that was it. I did the tip of the tornado, and then what ended up happening is here I had, 15 years sober. So now you add 15 years on top of those relationships that I should have gone back to in drinking. And then I was just humiliated. It was too embarrassing. Now I'm going to go back 15 years later, sober in AA and make these amends. Well, let me tell you, when you hang around a group of people that keep saying, where are you in the amends process? How do you know what you don't know? How free do you want to be? You'll end up being pressed into making those amends. And one of the things I didn't see coming was in my morning time, and we'll get more into this in the 11th step, is my meditation time is not of a silent meditation. Some people do that. Mine is more of a deep thought. Mine is more of a talking with God type meditation. It's kind of whatever floats your boat. But that is where the amends process came alive, and God was speaking to me about who I needed to go back to. It was as if I had an audible voice that said, it's time you need to see so-and-so. And I'd think, really? For sure? And it was freaking me out. And so I went back and made some of these amends. And let me tell you, my lineage, there's a blizzard going on, by the way, outside. Oh, my God. Squirrel. It got me that time. And it doesn't happen often, okay? But what ended up happening was, my lineage also didn't have strong sponsorship. Didn't have strong amends. And so now I'm always about, where are you in the amends process? Where are you in the amends process? And more than anything, Charlie's can get more into the mechanics of it, but I just want to share a couple of amends stories. In the process of this, one of the things is you'll hear in AA is the term living amends, right? And living amends is nowhere in our literature. There is no such thing. The one thing is there's a long road of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead with family. And then the end of the 12th step says practice these principles in all our affairs. That is what living amends is we do try to be better people and do that. But if I have stolen something, I need to go repair that, because that really falls under spiritual law, if you really want to know the truth, is we go back and we mend the past. Now, don't get me all mixed up yet. I want to just share one quick thing. There was when I had left home, I had a relationship with a guy in high school. we'd been together for 3 years. Now, remember, I left home early, so he and I were together for 3 years. His family had taken me in as a part of their family. It was a pretty cool deal, to say the least. I had left Houston and was living in this small town called Freeport. And one day I literally woke up. This is how self operates. Now, I didn't know this was happening at the time. It's always looking back. But I woke up one day and went, my God, this guy, I'm in love with this guy. He's in love with me. He's going to want to marry me. His dad owns a construction company in this small town. I do not want to live in this small town. I am not going to live in this small town. I got to get out of here. That happened after 3 years with this guy. He did nothing to me. He's not one of us. He was very kind to me. He was just unbelievable. And I literally overnight broke it off with him, got with another guy within a week, moved to Austin, never saw him again. Now that's a 3-year relationship. It was as close to leaving him at the altar as you possibly could. And it nagged at me so badly. It came to me in prayer and meditation in early sobriety. I just kept putting it off. I can't do it. Long story short, after I came out of untreated alcoholism, it came to me so strongly, and one day I just pulled off the road. It's not hard to find people these days. I looked for him on the internet. I found a phone number. I pulled off the road and just went, you've just got to do it. You have just got to do it. And so I called him. It's 35 years later. I called him. And he answered, and it was his home phone, believe it or not. Talk about God working miracles. I mean, what are the odds of you getting somebody at their home phone? And it was his home phone, and he answered, and I said, is this Johnny? And he said, yeah. I said, it's Kate Ostermiller. And he goes, no shit. That's not very good. I was kind of looking for a, really? Oh, my God, hey, long time no see. How are you? No shit. And it was like, yeah, I said, listen, I'm actually coming to Freeport, and I was just wondering if I could have some time to talk to you and talk about what happened 35 years ago. I said, it has never gotten very far from my memory, because I knew I'd damaged this man. There was no doubt about the damage I did to him. And he said, sure. And I said, are you still married? Because it's important that you see that he checked with his wife, right? The old girlfriend just can't come knocking on the door, and because I need to make the amends, hope it doesn't bother everybody. Oh, and by the way, I'm looking pretty good. You know what I mean? I mean, it's important that he clear it with his wife. And he said, well, I actually divorced that woman. He said, I can't remember exactly how he said it. He said, I divorced her. Women will either leave you or they die. Just like that, I thought, I probably didn't help that belief system there much for him at all, And this was a sweet, kind man, and he wasn't sounding just the most giving. And so he said, but I did marry so-and-so. And I said, I remember her. And I said, well, listen, I'd like to see you, and I'd like for you to see if it's okay with her, and if she wants to meet us, I'd like for that to happen too. Let me know. I'll be down there at such and such a time. Well, I come down a couple of weeks later, and I talked to my sponsor about this, and I said, on the phone, he'd said, Katie, what happened then is in the past. It's no big deal. You see, you boys will poo-poo a lot of stuff. You're not like the girls. The girls are like, oh, bring it. Bring every bit of it. Let's talk about the whole thing. But the boys can tend to poo-poo it. And they're like, that's water under the bridge. It's no problem, because it's uncomfortable, right? It's feelings. And so my sponsor said, I don't care if you have to take his cheeks in your hand. You make him sit there and listen to how sorry you were for the way you treated him. And so I end up meeting him for coffee, and what turned into about an hour and a half talk. And I had to get through that bravado of no big deal, no big deal, no big deal. He ended up crying 4 times. And he said, I've often thought about what our children would look like, what our lives would be. I mean, I broke this man's heart. And I would have missed that. See, I didn't sit there and feel guilt and shame. Don't get me wrong. I got an opportunity to let this man tell me how damaged and heartbroken he was, and that he does often think about me and how our life would have been. And I got to give him a big hug, because we weren't going, it's not like we're going to rekindle something. That wasn't it at all. But that magic of that moment I would have put off because just too much time had gone by. And that's what I'm telling you guys. When Mark says, how free do you want to be? I had no idea what's sitting there across from that man that I had damaged so badly, and got to listen to him, on 4 different occasions, tear up and say what he said. And so that's the kind of stuff you don't want to miss. You know, and here's the other thing I tell my sponsees. What would happen if somebody came to you that really hurt you badly and came and made that amends to you and held your hand and told you how sorry they were for hurting you? Would you have not just been touched by that gesture? And yet we'll say, I don't want to do that because of that level of self-centeredness, right? That driven by that self-centered fear. We won't do it, but if you do it to me, my life has moved, my world has changed. And so I encourage you to look at it from an entirely different angle and see as if that person came to you and made that amends, how special that would make you feel. Those were the two stories I just wanted to share.
Great. You know, and there's something, you know, we pound the self piece when we go through the steps. When we do a step study, we are so much about what the book says about that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem, and I see it repeated throughout the work, and I didn't see it for a long time. Because, I mean, we've seen it in the 4th step, the 5th step, right? Are you with me on that? Mm-hmm. Listen to what it says in the 8th step. Now we go out on page 76 in the third new paragraph, about halfway through the third new paragraph on page 76. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. Listen to this. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Does that sound like it's restating the deal in step 3? Does that sound like one of those little hub lines reminding me of the deal we made in step 3? It's telling me once again that where these harms come from is they are the kind of debris that accumulates out of a life run on self-will. I'm in constant collision with something or somebody, and I hurt people. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to go out. And the thing it says, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. That's the first prayer in there. And it says, remember it was agreed at the beginning we'd go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. There's 5 pages that I know of in the book where it talks about being willing to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. They're on page 58, page 76, page 78, page 90, and page 96. It happens in the 12th step. It implies in the 12th-step call in working with others that I'm supposed to ask this guy, are you willing to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol? It talks about it in how it works, you know. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. You know, that's what it's talking about. And it goes on here. But the thing about it says probably there's some misgivings that goes, but you know, this thing about the selfish program, look at what it says at the top of page 77. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself. It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. What? Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of... It doesn't say... I used to think that it said our real purpose is to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. And then they do the set-aside prayer one day and you're looking at it and it says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be down on the street corner with a bullhorn and a Bible and gauze clothing and, you know, that sort of thing, and quit my job and go right. But I'm supposed to fit myself, try to get as unblocked as I possibly can, get close to this power, stay close to it, perform His work well, and He will take care of what I need. You know, I can't pound that deal enough that we made in step 3, that He'll provide what I need if I stay close to Him and perform His work well. All I can tell you is I made a decision a few years back to try to go all in on this deal, to see what would happen if we actually did the whole deal all the way, pay all the taxes, actually pay the insurance, you know, not cheat on anything, be honest about everything, make these amends, stay close to Him, perform His work well. And all I can tell you is He's been doing a kick-ass job of holding up His end of the deal. Mm-hmm. You know, the last few years have been unbelievable. I mean, I'm flush for the first time in my life. I used to spend all my time focused around work. Now it seems like I spend half my time working with drunks, but I've never been in this good. I'm in the best relationship I've ever been in. I don't know if it's. I don't believe in coincidences on this kind of stuff. You know, it really seems like the deal is working. But, you know, part of the deal, when we talk about, there's a lot of instructions on the amends process, and it tells us how to approach different kinds of people. We're doing real good on time on this one, aren't we, honey?
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in for one more quick story.
Because before you tell this story, what I was going to say is part of living a life based completely on self is that I have very little awareness of my effect on other people. Mm-hmm. You know, part of getting with this amends, when we do this card process, what we'll do is we'll put on there the name of the person I harmed, their contact information, and then the nature of the amends, and then down at the bottom I'll put, how can I make this right, and have I harmed you in any other way? And those two questions are so powerful. And one of the things you have to be able to push through, what Katie said is, well, we don't want to make this person uncomfortable, but most people have never experienced anything like this. Very few of us have ever had somebody come to us and say, I have wronged you and I want to make that right. And boy, it can change the ripple effect that can happen. We don't know what it's going to be like. That guy might drive home from there and go, I've never seen anything like that in my life. You know, who have I wronged? You know, who do I need to straighten things up with, and that sort of thing. But part of living a life based completely on self is I have very little awareness of my effect on other people because I'm only focused on me, you know. And so when we get into an amends and I say to my sister, can you imagine a pinhead like me going to my sister and saying, Carol, I've harmed you and I want to make amends to you. Here's the $15 I stole out of your purse in 1977, you know. And when I say, have I harmed you in any other way, can you see her going, so you think that's the way you harmed me? Is taking $15 out of my purse? Sit down and let's talk for a minute, you know. Let's talk about robbing me of my brother. Let's talk about making my mother's house, an unsafe place to live. Let's talk about making it where they had no idea what was going to happen or if their stuff was going to be in the pawn shop or not. Let's talk about robbing my dad of the security of knowing that, you know, and all of a sudden you're going, holy shit, I just wanted to pay back the $15, you know. But you see what I mean about, you know, and now this can be carried much too far. Because I sat with Katie one time and I said, I made amends for this stuff and I said, you know, I'd like to give you some time to consider if I've harmed you in any other way, you know, and we'll talk about it later, you know, because I really do want to clear this up. Well, so, you know, we're rolling along and one day we're talking about something and she goes, oh, that's on the list. I talked about something stupid I'd done one time. She goes, oh, that's on the list. And I said, what list is that? And she goes, you told me I got some time to consider. And I went, oh, no, hold on a minute. You know, that had like a 1 week statute of limitations on it. You know, well, it's, you know.
This was 8 months later.
This was 8 months later. But I'll tell you, I've still got the list. And we sat down one day. She said, I'm ready to read the list to you. And we sat down, and I got to tell you, I had harmed her in ways that I would have never put on my amends list. There was stuff that she'd put on there, you know, there was the time you did this, and there was the time you did, and, you know, and it was a moving experience.
It was, and I'll tell you, one of the things that was so cool about it, I got a sponsee to do it too with her husband, was that Charlie, first of all, gave me the opportunity to do this. I mean, I'm telling you, there was times I'd be laying in bed mad at him and another thought would pop up and I'd go over there and I'd write it on this list. I kept this one list going. And, you know, as I told you guys, there were 6 years before we got married. I mean, there was a lot of damage done to each of us back and forth. And, but the thing that was amazing is when he let me read that list to him, which was incredibly emotional. I mean, I'm talking snot flying and crying and just...
From her, not me.
Yeah, from me. He was just stoic going, you know, writing. And I was completely freed of those resentments. That I mean, he had done some damage to me as far as I was concerned based on this stuff. And every time we get in a fight, it was like I had a Rolodex in my head of all these things, and you did this, and you did this. And I mean, maybe it's the way women are wired. I don't know, but I couldn't get rid of it. I was praying and asking God, and that process, gone. I mean, gone. Now, I did come up with 3 that I left off the list in the last several weeks.
What we're trying to tell you, though, is don't rob yourself of this experience. on the basis of self-will, I won't make these amends. And there's an experience available there that you can't talk about until you've done it. But when we say that the bulk of the advice in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is geared towards not having to make the amends, you can find people that will say, you don't need to make that amends. They'll stretch to the point I've even heard people say, well, no, see, it says, unless to do so would injure them or others, and you're others, so paying that money back is going to injure you. Well, there's a line in there where it says the rule is that we're hard on ourselves and easy on others. And I think that speaks to whether I get to be part of others. It's not saying, but as self-centered as I am, I'm going to latch onto that and go, yeah, by God, I don't have to do it, but...
Tell them about the bank.
Oh, we're sitting in a meeting. Now, I go in a meeting one time, and I'm chairing this meeting, and I had a sponsee with me, and I said, I want you to watch this. I said, I want you to watch this. I want you to sit right here. We were up to our ears in the amends process. I said, I want you to watch this. I'm going to chair this meeting on making direct amends to people we've harmed. I want you to watch what happens in the course of this meeting. I want you to listen to people avoid the topic or say that you don't have to do it. And at the end of the meeting, I said, what did you think? And he said, if you hadn't told me it was going to happen, I would have never believed it. It was unbelievable. You could not get anybody in that meeting to talk about having made direct amends to people they had harmed. They talk all around it. One lady goes, I used to work for this company, and I embezzled a lot of money from them, and I'm making living amends to them now because I'm working for another company, and I'm not stealing from them. I was like, oh, my God. I was like, that's got to be really comforting to the company that you used to work for. Can you imagine going up and knocking on, this guy's house and going, dude, I just want to tell you, I broke into your garage one time and I stole all your tools, but I'm making living amends to you because I'm not doing that anymore. Thank you. The guy whose TV I stole doesn't care that I'm not stealing TVs anymore. They want their television set back. That's what it's talking about making direct amends to people they've harmed. And I've had experiences. Jamie, one of my favorite sponsees, calls me up one day, and we live in Austin. It's the big music town. You got to sponsor a few musicians, and I'm talking to this guy. He goes, "Hey, I'm looking at this new bass guitar, and it's really awesome, and and it's kind of always wanted, and he's making money now. He's got a job." And I said, "Jamie, did you make amends to that studio that you ripped off back when you were using?" And he goes, "No, not yet." And I went, "So that money you got in your pocket, who does it belong to?" And he goes, "I guess it's theirs." And I was like, "So do you want to steal from these guys twice?" And he goes, "Fine, I won't buy the guitar." But he goes and he makes amends, and I've been watching these guys clean this stuff up, and then you come out of this deal actually, knowing that you've worked in an AA program and you've made every effort to clean up the past, and it's the scary ones that come out with the most dramatic stories. Mm-hmm. You see people doing stuff that they would not. The same Jamie that we're talking about. And Katie, I almost never get through this story because this guy, I'm out at the treatment center one time doing volunteer work, and this guy is I'm doing the first step, and I look up, and here comes this guy. I'll show you guys on my phone a picture of this guy later. He's walking towards me. He's got ink, every inch of skin you can see. He's got a ring in his nose. He's got a big full beard. He's got dreadlocks literally down past his waist. He's pigeon-toed, and he's kind of walking over towards me, and he's like, "What's up?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, dear God, please don't let him ask me to sponsor him, And he walks up, and it has been one of the most fulfilling relationships. I never get through this guy because I watch this guy. This is a guy that knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that his life was saved and changed by the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. This was a hopeless, drunken dope fiend sitting in a treatment center that had no shot.
Riding a bike.
I've watched God move in this guy's life like nothing you've ever seen, and I almost missed it. To not get to be a part of this experience. I watched this guy go up to Mount Olive, New Jersey one time and turn himself into the police up there on a 19-year-old warrant. And he told me before he left that he goes, "I know the only reason," he said, "I don't think I'd go to jail on this." He said, "But the only reason they would put me in jail is because there's somebody sitting in that jail that I'm the only one that could carry the message to them." That's not the power of Jamie. That's not the power of Charlie Parker. That's the power of God moving in somebody's life. And I almost missed it. You know, to have been brought back into doing this program at a deep level has been the most meaningful thing that's ever happened in my life. I mean, I was dying of untreated alcoholism at 17 years sober. And if you'd have told me at that time that what is going to change my life and set me on fire is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous out of the big book, I would have told you you're out of your mind, because I've been banging around AA for 17 years. I know what AA brings me, but it turns out there was a level of the game going on that I had never even stuck a toe in the water. You know, I've talked about it many, many times. I almost missed it. If I'd have died, I was in a plane crash in 2003. If I'd have died in that plane crash, I would have never known. I would have thought I had been in AA. I would have thought I had experienced what AA had to offer, and it turns out I hadn't dipped a toe in the water, man. I mean, when we met Mark, and we met Chris, when we met all these guys, when we started doing this deal at a whole nother level, Mark used to say, how do you know what you don't know? Mm-hmm. And how free do you want to be? And God almighty, man.
I want to tell this one quick story. One of the lines that really jumped out to me was on page 77, about first paragraph down. It says, the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. And, you know, I got to tell you guys, I had somebody on my inventory 4 times, this one individual. And I really couldn't stand this individual. I mean, you know, and he was in the program, and I saw him often, and he just, you know how somebody just rubs you the wrong way, just bugs the crap out of you. And he did. And he was on my inventory, and I never followed it through with the need to make an amends, because I didn't see any harm that I had done to him. So I never made an amends. It was not necessary. I just didn't like him. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. The deal was done. And then I have a meeting at the house on Monday nights with all my girls, and I was talking about this particular individual, and I said, you know, the truth is, guys, I'm not proud to say this, but I actually can hate somebody. I'm, you know, once again, I'm being very transparent with you. I absolutely can hate somebody. And one of my sponsees just couldn't believe I was saying that, and I was showing her the line in the book, and I said, you know, I've written inventory. I guess I'm just not, you know, God's not taking it, whatever. And then all of a sudden, after everybody left, her reaction bothered me so badly. And I thought, you know what? Am I missing something here, God? Is there something more I need to be doing? And I am not kidding you. Once again, that you know, where it says our thought life will be placed on a higher plane, it was as if God said, you need to make an amends to him. And I thought, oh, no, that's a bad plan. Bad plan. I don't really, you know, what am I going to go, hey, I've been talking crap about you at meetings, you know, I mean, that's not a good amends, right? Mm-hmm. That's not what the amends process is about. And all of a sudden, I went to this meeting, and I saw him. I went up to him, and I said, if you got a minute after the meeting, I'd like to talk to you. And he goes, sure. And I sit back down, and I said, okay, God, I've set the ball rolling here. Talk to me. I need something. And all of a sudden, an event came to mind where he had been a party to it, right? He'd been in the room, and I'd embarrassed him, and I'd insulted one of his friends. I know that's hard to believe that we can do that, but I had done it. And I had insulted one of his friends, and that affected him. And actually, it's when the wedge between our relationship about 4 years began. And I went up to him, and I told him how sorry I was for having put him in a predicament where I hurt his friend's feelings. And I went into this amends, and he gave me this big hug, and he goes, thank you so much. And I'm not kidding you. The part that really blew me away was the next morning, I thought of him first thing and wondered how his day was. And I actually, had it been appropriate, I would have called him and said, hey, how you doing? But that would have been inappropriate. It just wasn't the right thing to do. But the fact that I actually, my very lives as ex-problem drinkers depends upon the constant thought of others, I thought of him. I mean, talk about magic. That's the part where he was on my inventory for 4 years. I had no idea I needed to follow that through, and God gave it to me right before I went up to him. I remembered what I had done. Because once again, we're blinded to that. So I thought that was a pretty cool little story. I didn't mean to take that off of Jamie's touching
No, it's
story.
all good. But, you know, what's funny is when we sat down at the table with Mark for that Thursday night meeting of mine, I felt so fortunate that one of my heroes had moved to Austin, had agreed to sponsor me, and now he's actually making a priority of coming over to the house on Thursday nights with me and all my sponsors. Well, we sit down at the table, and it's our first meeting, and we don't know how this is going to go, and it feels like we're being kind of intuitive, and what should we do? Well, when you get a group of us together, a bunch of self-centered alcoholics, and we want to address the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, what's the first thing we're going to want to do?
Talk about me.
Write inventory, right? How many of us think when we need to get back into the deal, I must need to go write inventory, right? Because surely that's it. I need to go write inventory. Well, Mark sits down there and he goes, where are you at in the amends process? Everybody kind of hangs their head a little bit. You know, I go, from the last amends you did, you know, have you made any of those amends? You know, and actually, no. You know, I've still got most of those. So, and I thought it was so intuitive of him. I'm seeing now that it's what you need to say to everybody, because what happens is we do the amends process, we do a fifth step with somebody, we go do 6 and 7, and then when we get up to the amends process, I think I'll go to the 5:30 meeting. And, you know, and what happens is over a period of time, I start getting uncomfortable again, and then eventually I go, I need to write inventory again. Could we get together and write inventory? And you're like, and he's like, no, we're going to do the amends from the last inventory you did, you know, but that did not occur to us. So what we did, and I want to say this in the little time we got left, this was a very powerful exercise. With this group of guys that all had spiritual consent with each other, we're all sitting around the table, and we came up with the idea, let's all write our amends list. And let's meet here next Thursday and read our amends list to each other. And because we all had spiritual consent with each other, we weren't worried about anybody, you know, hearing any of this stuff because it's going to stay at that table. But it was such a powerful experience because not only did it get me into writing what amends I needed to make, we sit down, you know, with a group of guys like this right here, and when this guy reads his inventory list, you best have your pen and paper handy because I guarantee you things that are on his list are going to wind up on your list, you know. And then this guy reads his list, and, you know, and he'd go, I ate in a lot of restaurants and ran out without paying. And you're like, oh, well, okay. I didn't think of that one. You know, and then the next guy goes, I used to buy gas and drive off without paying. And I'm like, oh, you know, and I start writing, you know, and what happens is, you know, my list got a lot longer, but it also got us all accountable to each other. You know, how you doing on, are you making any approaches on any of those amends? Whatever happened to that deal with your mother? And, you know, and that sort of thing. And he got us out there making these amends. And the other thing I can tell you is that when your consciousness opens to the amends process, they will come bubbling to the surface. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how much effort has been put forth up to now in keeping those little turds punched down below the surface. But when we open up to the process, they just start going bloop, 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 you know, and it is unbelievable. Chris was talking one time. I don't know what made it pop to the surface, but I was listening to Chris talk one time, and he goes, if I'd have known I was going to have to make amends, I wouldn't have stolen so much. And then, bloop, it just popped to the surface that I stole this Volkswagen one day in high school. And I was like, oh my God, I had completely blocked that out. You know, and stuff starts popping to the surface. You know, I went back and made amends for riding my motorcycle on a golf course and doing a donut around the green. I mean, I'll never forget it. I called this guy up, and I'm in the golf business. You know, I called this guy up, and I said I told him what I did, and he goes, when was this? And I said, best of my recollection, 1972. And he's like, I think that grass has grown back pretty well now, you know. and I was like, well, let me just tell you, I'm really sorry. And, you know, because there's a place in there where it says, arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we're sorry. And there's a lot of instructions. We're just bouncing around the perimeter of the amends process, but there's a lot of instructions about people we owe money, the family, the man we hate, when other people are involved. You know, like if I had a situation where 3 of us had broken into a safe and split the money, and it's different to go back and make amends to that. I can't go back and go, you know, me and Dane and JJ broke into your safe and stole your $3,000 and here's my third. You know, it talks about what to do when other people are implicated, and you have to talk to them. You have to get their permission. Then the drastic, you know, is if it's implicated, then we make the approach. But there's ways of making all this stuff. Sometimes we have to write an honest letter, but there's just, actually being interested in this process, it's an amazing thing. And I've been watching a lot of experience happen, and it's taken the AA to a level that I never would have known was. But one of the things, well, we're there's not going to be. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. And but one of the things that I just wanted to say too, guys, is we read a lot about the 9-step promises, and they are absolutely amazing. But one of the things that I think is always important is that you never make an amends until you run it past your sponsor. Don't go out there and think just because you feel guilty you need to do it. I believe God is preparing your heart and the other person's heart. If you have honestly tried to find somebody and can't, it's probably because they're not ready yet. And I really believe that God is always out there doing magic. The amends process is not just when we're ready, but it's when all parties involved are ready. And so we have to really respect that. And then I think, honey, that we should wrap it up, and then we'll start with 10 tomorrow.
I've got a couple of announcements once the CD is off. But I encourage you to go through these pages, up to about, pages, because it is amazing how many instructions there are in there about sweeping away the debris that is accumulated out of my effort to live on self-will, and how to clean that up. And when, Katie talks a lot about spiritual law, Emmett Fox talks a lot about spiritual law, but I really don't think we can get over in this area, and what's amazing is how many times, if I actually take the commitment and go, you know what, God's got me on this deal. If I take this $200 and pay back this guy, it's not going to put a dent in me. It's going to add to me, and it's amazing how looking back, I go, oh man, not only am I okay, I'm better off than I've ever been, plus, being able, so I really believe in this process. We're going to break now, and then Linda's got an announcement that we'll make after the end of the deal. So stand put for just a second, and I want to tell you, it takes a lot of energy to sit up here and do this all day, but I really admire you guys for sitting out there and doing it all day. And I just think you should give yourselves a big hand, because
we've been on both sides of that, and it's hard to stay awake.
For those of you that have not if you nodded out, believe me, we didn't notice. So we're just happy everybody's here, and we really enjoyed being a part of this. And we're going to break for the rest of the night, and then tomorrow morning we're going to do steps 10, 11. Wait. Everybody's got a homework assignment. I brought a 10th step. Oh my God, I said it again. I brought an 11th step evening review form for everybody, and I'd just like for you to take it tonight and do a written evening review on this form, and so we'll have some fresh experience to talk about in the morning. So please come up and get one of those at the end of the day.
And then also, we start at 9:30, but there's an 8 to 9 meeting, as Bill sees it, AA meeting. There's also an Al-Anon meeting that meets in the small room, and then at 7:15 there's a meditation from 7:15 to 8, and that meeting sometimes gets lost in the mix. 7:15 to a quarter till 8. And so okay, well then we're going to make another change.